Yeah. No front number. Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome to another episode of Unashamed Unafraid, unashamed of sexual addiction recovery, and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing. Chris, recovery's hard, man.
Recovery is hard, right?
Is hard, but you know what makes it a little bit less hard?
What's that, Sam?
When you have the right resources and you have experts to guide you through it.
Yep.
And we've got an expert today. Trish, how are you? This is Dr. Trish
Amen.
Leigh.
Yeah, hey, I am doing great, and I am so glad to be here.
Awesome. So if there's a listener out there, I actually knew who you were before we had you on the podcast, but if there's someone out there who isn't familiar with your work, would you kind of just catch us up to speed on what you do and kind of your expertise?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I am a cognitive neuroscientist. I have written a book. It's called Mind Over Explicit Matter. It's published through HarperCollins. I've been a cognitive neuroscientist long before I pivoted into porn, which we can talk about as we get rolling here. But I have a unique perspective in that I have helped tens of thousands of people, but I can see how those people's brains are performing. I use technology. It's called EEG, electroencephalogram. So I can see the brain functioning of a person who's struggling. Then I am very grateful to be able to use technology to help a person to regulate their brain and overcome their struggles and challenges, not just by getting a handle on behaviors, but by actually regulating their nervous system so they no longer have any need for pornography or sexual acting out. So that is my shtick. So when I pivoted into helping people with porn addiction, it is just a mission. And I can tell you more about that. I changed all of my work because I couldn't let it go. And now I spend all day, every day trying to help people become aware of the dangers and understand how they can begin, continue, and end recovery, which we also can talk about because recovery's hard.
Yeah, well, why don't we
Yeah.
start there? So begin, continue, and end. Why do you differentiate it that way?
Well, recovery, the word, it means to recover one's true self. And, here you're talking about coming on to Christ. The way that I talk about it is it's very much the same, but I talk about getting back to your divinely inspired self. And when you do that, don't get me wrong, you have to build the foundation. And likely that's what you all are doing, is building the foundation of the lifestyle that protects your divinely inspired self so that then you can live out your days, continuing to create the life that you've always wanted and deserve in service and also enjoyment of the human condition. So I believe that recovery has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but the end is protecting the foundation. What I don't want is for people to live a life of struggle thinking that that is recovery. It should be a life of purpose and passion.
Yeah. Love that.
So Trish, you talked about using EEG machines or scanners in order to aid you and kind of what you do and how you work with people who come and do recovery. Can you tell us more about that? Because I've heard a little bit about your background, and I think I actually listened to another podcast that you were on where you talked about it, but there's a lot there, and I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm so excited to be able to use the technology. A lot of times people think I invented it because I'm so excited about it. The technology's been around for over 125 years. It's been
Wow.
applied in the way that I apply it for 75 years. But I really am the only person who applies it towards sex addiction, compulsive behaviors in terms of hypersexuality. I had for a long time looked, and then I found, and I've collaborated for a decade with a company that allows me to provide that service using online portals, secure online portals. So I work with people all over the world. I started we still have an office, my husband and I, he runs the office now. I left the office, almost a decade ago when I found that online portal software. So the way that it works is there's hardware that you can purchase, and it's actually quite affordable. And then you get it at home and you link into my app and you're able to take your brain map at home. And then instantaneously, I can see on my computer how your brain's performing. And then I walk people through it. I have a Zoom meeting with people. And it's really, I'm always, a little afraid that a person's going to be upset because I have had people who are very upset about their brain map findings. But when it comes to hypersexuality and porn addiction, people are relieved because the struggle that they are going through is explained by the way that their nervous system is working. And then they understand if they can improve their brain function, it won't be so difficult. And that's exactly what happmes.
So what
Yeah.
do you
So-
see? Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, so you said that there's people that get upset about their brain function. And so tell us about that. Like, why would somebody be mad about it?
Yeah, it's the grieving process, which I can appreciate. I've gone through, I'm sure you all have had that, and I've done that. Like, oh no, what have I done to myself? People are like, what have I done to myself? And, that I always talk about versions of ourselves. I already talked about becoming the best version. I'm like, you have to give grace to all the versions of yourself. Like, even me of yesterday is a different version because the amount that I learn and apply each day makes every day I'm a different version of myself. So, people do get upset because they're like, how could I, and I'm sure I'm sure you've heard people's stories. Another part of the unique aspect of my work is I have personally talked to thousands and thousands of people who struggle with sex addiction and porn addiction. And I'm accused of hyperbole a lot online. And I get why people accuse me of that because they don't know. They have
Totally.
the vast majority of people have no clue the dark places that porn and sex addiction can take a person. So, these are people who are really struggling and they haven't shared those struggles with anybody sometimes. So, then they see it in their brain and like, okay, yes, now I get why I do the things that I do. And now there is hope for me to be able to, get out of this vortex.
Wow.
This is like so fascinating to me. I have never, because I've never heard about this, and I've been in the recovery world so I started
know,
in my
that's
recovery
why-
world since 2007. So this is like super
That's why
cool.
that's why I've been at my desk since 5:30 a.m. because I am so psyched about hopefully the way that I'm going to present this to the world in the new year will help to clarify it. I'm always trying to help people understand that, the algorithm, which is my new pivot, the algorithm, which then, of course, is hypersexualized, and then porn proper is up at the top of what are called supernormal stimuli. Supernormal stimuli make the brain produce excessive amounts of dopamine. That excessive dopamine flood changes the way that the nervous system operates, namely brain function. And this happens to people typically when they're, 8, 9, 10 years old is when the seeds of addiction are planted. It's mostly children who are finding pornography for the first time. And in that first exposure, we know scientifically that it changes the need for dopamine so that on the second exposure, the brain's anticipating higher levels. And then, so basically that's a dopamine dependency. That's the number one thing that I see in people's brain maps. It's called a brain map. The second thing is the need for the reinforcement loops. And those are the, quote unquote habits that people engage. And I put them in quotes because they're compulsions, not habits.
Right.
Being late is a habit. Needing to go act out sexually to be able to feel okay, that's a compulsion.
Right.
Wow.
I think it's cool that you clarified that and separated that.
So
Yeah.
how does
I want
this-
people to know, like, it's not healthy. Like, if you are at your desk and you're working and you have a sexual urge, that's not sexual desire. Like, that's not healthy human desire for physical intimacy. That's a call for dopamine. That's your brain going, I can't get through one more second of work without a hit of dopamine.
So how does this kind of information inform your recovery and change the way that someone steps into the way that they, trying to get sober, trying to heal, trying to recover?
Sure. So I just put out a video on NoFap, which people were not happy with me. So then I put out a clarifying video, but then I went old school because I've been a university professor. Uh, I haven't been in a while, but I started as a university professor for a very long time. So I just put together a slideshow. I'm like, I'm going old school on this with slides and research and because what my premise was, which is very much backed by science, is that we have to address the underlying brain dysfunction. It's miswiring in the brain. And without addressing that, if the brain isn't regulated, you aren't fully recovered. That's why I say recovery has an end.
Right.
And and so I put it out to people like, if you still have urges and cravings, which it's difficult for people at the beginning of the journey to be able to discern that from healthy sexuality, which we can go into that too. But, if you have these urges and cravings, your brain is still miswired. And then, of course, like if they're, whatever multitude of acting out behaviors are still happening, if you feel anxious, if you can't focus, if you feel unmotivated, if you have sexual arousal dysfunction, which I call SAD, namely ED, your brain is miswired. I would want you to have a brain map, but I don't even need you to have one. If you're struggling with any of those things, those are brain based. Those are miswirings.
Yeah, and we're not talking about just because compulsion is different than temptation, right? And or are you saying that's the same thing? Because I've got coming up in next month, I'll have 18 years of sobriety from pornography.
Yeah,
Every once in a while, I'll have a temptation. It'll come in and it'll leave just as fast. But then there's sometimes that it'll sit with me, and then I go to my system that I've used for 18 years to get me out of it, right? So you're saying there's still something that's in my brain.
Yes. I'm sorry to tell you.
Okay, alone, speak to me.
Okay,
this is
so
fascinating.
So, if you're able to not give into it, so temptation means that something in your life has occurred, and you already basically said that something's going on in your life. In my program, the way that I talk about it is we have to basically unwire your brain from the need, then rewire your brain to the healthy performance pattern, hardwire it in, and then skill build. And you're talking about skills. So like if you feel an urge and you recognize, oh, I'm stressed out because my mother-in-law's been in town for 2 weeks. Like then you go, okay, in-laws in town equals more stress, which means I need to employ more of my skills. Like that's very healthy self-regulation.
Totally.
So it doesn't mean that like inherently you're miswired. It means I call it episodic dysregulation. You're having an episode, and if you can apply your skills in that moment and not have a slip, not have a relapse, then you're on the other side of recovery.
Right.
So it's not about, but like if you can't even go out because you can't stop lusting after people and you're triggered everywhere, if you are constantly triggered, you're miswired still. You
Totally.
have not gotten to the other side. But, life happens. So, one really cool thing about my work is that after we do a brain map, then I use neuromodulation techniques. I can use technology to actually give the brain a workout so the brain gets stronger without the person having to use their mind or their body to do it. It's at the level of the brain. But the thing I was going to tell you that's so cool is it's all measurable. So I can see, like, if I saw your brain during the time where you had the temptation, I would see likely you had a stress spike and then you had a dopamine spike or an urge, a need for dopamine, because your brain has been taught that when stress comes in, dopamine is the way to soothe that stress. And the way you get dopamine is from sexuality.
Yeah.
It's the linking of the dopamine. So that link is still there. There's a transcription factor in the brain called delta phos B. And what that transcription factor does is, the easiest way to think about it is it kind of like lays cement in the neural pathways that lead people towards compulsion or addiction. That's why, once in recovery, always in recovery type of thing.
Right.
Even
Which
though,
we don't
the
believe
end
that
state.
here. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like, you don't want to let that foundation break down,
yeah.
So how do you, I mean, you said that delta phos B is a sort of a cementing factor in the brain. How do you reverse that process
How do you
in
break
the
out
brain
that cement?
so that
Yeah.
some of that deeper stuff and the neural wiring that we're discussing can get altered and changed? Or you said earlier, undoing the need, and then how did you say that?
Yeah. The way I talk about it is unwire, rewire, hardwire, like
Okay.
from a neuro. So unwire is, basically, which is very difficult for people. So, I don't want to overstep that. This is probably the most challenging part, to at least the first hurdle to get over, is to bring down the need for high levels of dopamine in the brain. And that's why, like, going back to the question, like, how do I fit into this, the larger scheme of what we're talking about here, is that if you try to overcome the need for dopamine with just your mind and your body, it's very difficult, because you're usually using a very distorted mind.
Right.
And we can talk about that if you want. Like, the thoughts that come along with compulsion are not necessarily healthy thoughts. And then at the same time, the body will feel those urges also. So I have put together a very comprehensive plan of how a person can unwire that need, but using technology makes it a lot easier. And just for clarification for your sake and for your listeners, everything that's in my program is in my book, Mind Over Explicit Matter. So it's not the whole program, but it is the overarching steps. And that's why I'm so excited for that book to be in the world, because it's a beautiful first step for people to figure out, like, okay, this is the neurological impact, and these are the steps for the unwire. And it's organized in that way too.
Right.
Unwire, do these things. Rewire, do these things. Hardwire, do these things.
So it's really
And
like
just
simplified. It's not like too complicated for anybody to just pick up and be like, "Hey, I can totally get this. I can understand it." Even though there's probably some, maybe I don't want to say jargon because that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
There's some words in there that they may not understand, or they can learn or understand a little bit more to understand what's going on in the brain.
Yeah, it's very simplified. Like, I think a gift that I've developed over time, part of my divinely inspired self, is that I have learned to take very complex concepts and be able to communicate them to people in a more digestible manner that's easy to understand and apply. Like, I remember when I was back in school and a colleague was studying the word if, and I'm like, how does that apply to helping the world? I'm like,
Right.
these scientific studies should help the world. And honestly, in the last year, I've been doing studies with my EEG data on porn-induced erectile dysfunction, because I believe it's the number one thing crisis that society is quietly dealing with, and nobody's really talking about it, nor are they coming up with solution.
I'm having more and more of my clients that come to me and say that that's one of the issues that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
And
That's a very miswired brain. By the time
Yeah.
you get to ED, the level of dopamine desensitization basically is the reason that happens. The dopamine receptors in the brain go dull from such overstimulation. So now the way I talk about it is, pornography or sexual acting out in other ways is very overstimulating. So that's like a level 20 on a 1 to 10 scale of healthy arousal. And then you go to be with your human partner, and, on a good day, she's a 9, right? And I always joke with husbands, like, and if she knows about your porn problem, she's mad at you, she's a solid 4.
Right.
So we are talking about a
If you're lucky.
16-point gap. If you're lucky, we are talking about a 16-point gap to close there in terms of arousal. On a bad day, on a good day, we're talking about an 11-point gap. It's still just too far of a gap. And then,
Right.
but what happens is people, they'll go to fantasy in their mind to be able to quote unquote perform. And I like to remind people, healthy sexuality isn't a performance, it's an experience.
Totally.
People forget that
Yep.
because of porn. So, then they inadvertently are reinforcing the miswired brain pattern that is causing the ED. So, I always joke there's no such thing as a horizontal spiral. You're either in a downward spiral or an upward spiral. I consider my job is to help people break their downward spiral and, start climbing upward.
Yeah.
What do you see in your EEG scans that might help you predict when those spirals might occur? Can you predict those type of things?
Yeah, and in the brain maps, I can see baseline brain performance in the brain maps, which gives me an indicator of a person's stress tolerance, their need for dopamine, like overall energy, fatigue, stress, anxiety levels, depression. I can see all of that. It's in the progress visualization charts. When I'm working with a client, I can see what their brain's doing every single day. That ebbing and flowing really tells the story. And I can see if it's changed. Then I ask clients to put notes in the system so I can help them connect their brain performance to what's happening in their life in terms of environment, or their own behaviors, and then also connect that to how they feel. At the beginning of this journey, self-awareness is very low. So how I said, like, people will have a very distorted mindset because of the brain dysfunction. It's brain dysfunction. Then they'll have a distorted mindset, but self-awareness is very low typically.
Right. So what is it that you're looking for? So when you get the brain scan, what is it that really stands out to you? You're like, this guy's jacked up. Like, he's
Yep.
got some problems. We know we can work through it, but there's some obviously big issues here.
Yeah. So now my new thing after that no fap moment, and I'm like, I'm making this PowerPoint slide, which took me like 6 hours.
So
like, I should
you're
not be
saying
working on
no
this.
fab or no fat?
No fap. Do you know the no fap movement?
No.
It's a movement.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, totally. Yeah.
Like,
no.
like,
Yeah.
because
you a
it's like,
porn
no,
coach?
like, yeah. Yeah.
I got it.
Like,
I got it.
because of November. So,
Right.
so because of that video, I now have the idea that I'm going to make more slideshows. I haven't even put that slideshow out. I don't even know if people like it. I just think it's going to be easier to explain. And my point about that is that, well, first, just to back up for 1 second, back when I pivoted into porn, the reason I did it is because a friend of mine, someone very close to me, they didn't tell me, but I figured out eventually. Then they told me that porn was at the root of everything that was going on in their life in terms of relationship destruction, difficulties at work, not being, unmotivated, anxiety, ADHD types of symptoms. I write about it in the book. I call him Sam in the book. But long story short, what I wanted to tell you is I created a YouTube channel when that happened, just on accident. I put a video out. It says nothing of neuroscience consequence. The first video, all I say is don't watch porn. It damages your brain. Literally, that's
Right.
it. It became a meme. Somebody snagged it and put it on TikTok, and it became a meme, which I think is really interesting because check this out, and then I'll get back to the actual point. Check this out. All these men took that. I didn't even know how TikTok worked at the time, stitched it of them doing stupid stuff to show how damaged their brain was. Millions of men.
Wow.
Like, isn't that interesting? Isn't
Right.
that just interesting? And like, I thought that was, I didn't even have a TikTok account. Some other guy took my thing and then all these guys stitched it. I'm like, this is really, the need for this is high because people think this is funny, right? But on my YouTube channel, now there's over 2,000 videos. All of them have a brain hack strategy. So that's a way I'm trying to help people too. So, going back to that question, like, why do I think people need to know the neuroscience? Once people understand what their brain is doing, then they can understand some techniques that they can use with their mind and their body. They can help their own cause. If they're not able to help their own cause, I want them to know it's because that brain dysfunction is significant and they need professional help.
Right.
And then they can call me because I'm the one who can help them do that pretty quickly. But I've started to call the 2 brain patterns that I have compiled after tens of thousands of brain maps of people who struggle with pornography. I call them strained brain and drained brain to make it easy. Like going back to strained brain, talk about a jacked up brain, right? Strained brain is a brain that's going too fast and too slow simultaneously. So that's a person who's wired and tired, and they're kind of swinging back and forth. And I talk about this in my book too. They're swinging back and forth between stress and anxiety, fatigue and overwhelm. They're dragging, yet they're wired. And that brain needs to be soothed and stimulated at the same time. Porn is very good at that. All that dopamine takes the edge off, but it stimulates the brain. So that's the first brain map that I can see. They pop off the page for me now. Now, the other brain map is called drain brain. This brain map comes out of a brain that's been in strain brain for a long time. This is the person who's struggling with arousal dysfunction, sexual arousal dysfunction, ED, a person who feels unmotivated, a person who's starting to feel depressed, a person who doesn't like their work anymore. I always tell people, don't leave your job until we heal your brain, because you're probably going to love your job again. You just don't know it because there's not enough dopamine there anymore. All the dopamine's linked to sexuality. Same thing with partners. People want to leave their wives because they're boring and annoying and stressors. I'm like, a lot of that's coming from you, my man. So don't leave her just yet. Let's.
I have been through that myself for sure. Because I mean, that's why I came home or I only came home because I had kids, because I didn't want to be around my wife. You know, and so like I totally get that. And yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, so that's drain brain. So I usually see one, the other, or both. I mean, I always see one, the other, or both. It's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, which makes sense too, because now my wife and I, we have an amazing relationship, and we fight for each other. We do tons of stuff together. We connect. Like last night, we went for a drive for an hour. It was an hour drive up and then an hour drive back, and the whole time we're like asking each other these questions, like deep questions, and it's like having conversations, and it's beautiful, and we have an amazing relationship.
Yeah, I firmly believe that it can be a blessing if you do the work. Like, because most people, like I already told you, most people found porn when they were young, and they inadvertently bring the brain pattern that's associated with it into all their relationships. Like they never, you know, think about this. Think how wild this is. If you found porn, we'll just say 10 years old. You found porn at 10, brains develop until the age of 28, which means now your brain maladapted. It developed in the unhealthy pattern for 18 more years. So most people who have had, have had porn in their life that long, they've never developed the healthy pattern, and they've never experienced it. So that's why I tell people, like, you can experience your brain functioning in a way you've never felt, and that's going to change everything around you. And it does.
Wow. So
I am blown away.
Yeah,
this
is
cool.
amazing.
And by the way, nobody believes me until they work with me, because
I totally do. I 100%.
If I had $1 for every time like someone's like, just so you know, I'm a skeptic. I'm like, I totally get it. That's why I want people to know all my work's measurable. It's mind blowing. Like, it is the most fun. And even when a person's struggling, I can pinpoint that with them and, for them, and help them figure it out. And then self-awareness goes up. And it becomes synergistic. That downward spiral becomes an upward spiral. And by the way, the idea of a spiral is a neurological parameter. They're called feedback loops. Like, that is how everything in our life works. You're either accidentally in a negative feedback loop, or you're intentionally in a positive feedback loop.
Dr. Trish, I'm curious. People, they'll use your EEG and you'll get the feedback, but once they get to that point where you kind of have a sense for how their brain is reacting within their environment and what that says about, how their neural pathways have formed, where do you actually go from there? How do you work with someone who's getting help from you to implement strategies to change that wiring actively?
Yeah. So The strategy that I implement first and foremost is I set protocols that I've designed. So based on strain brain and drain brain, but it's always individualized. It's kind of like a fingerprint. Like if you saw a fingerprint, you're like, that's a fingerprint, but everybody's is different. So the brain maps are like that. So I set a protocol for each individual person after I explain it to them. And then I joke too. I'm like, if you're not following me, you don't have to know at all. All you have to know is I know, and I can, do this for you. I set the protocol in the technology, and then all the person has to do at the beginning is do sessions using the software. And I tell them, don't even try to change your behaviors for the first 30 days. Just build the habit of doing sessions at least one time a day. Take one day off a week, but at least one time a day. Most people with ED, and even most people who are still struggling with porn, they'll do 2 sessions a day. And I make a recommendation based off their brain map. This is the way it works. And I'll give you an analogy.
Yeah.
Then I can tell you all the scientific stuff. The analogy is in the software, it's like bicep curls for the brain. If you want big biceps, like you don't have to like go get a therapist and talk to them 4 days a week about how you get bigger biceps. What you have to do is get a set of weights and start cranking bicep curls
Right.
2 times a day. And then when the 20-pound weights get light, you swap them out for the 25s. When the 25s are light, you keep going 30s. Then if you need to start hitting the triceps, you hit the triceps. That's what the software does. It strengthens the brain. It uses something called operant conditioning. So basically, it's the proper amount of feedback in audio and visual, helping the person's brain move forward, just like a bicep needs the feedback of the weight or can't get stronger. Then 30 days later, and again, I have the data, I see a person's brain change significantly in 30 days. Once their brain is changed, which is usually 30 days later, then they start working in my digital program. There's 134 lessons in there, 40 quick start lessons, and 94 deep lessons. The lessons are unwire, rewire, hardwire. They're broken up into 3 categories. But again, like, if you have weak arms and I need you to pick up a super heavy couch, like, do I want you to keep trying to pick up that couch? No. I want you to go get stronger and then come back, and picking up the couch will be easy. So 30 days later, they start working the program and changing their mind and their behaviors. In the Unwire, I have people create a pivot plan. It's comprehensive, figuring out what their triggers are, figuring out the environmental aspects, making a plan for what they're going to do to get dopamine in the day and in the night. It's very specific. There's more to the Unwire section. In the Rewire section, it's basically about creating a flexibly scheduled life, making sure you're getting enough real life dopamine. One thing I have people do is do what I call an executive function project. That project fires the prefrontal cortex back up. Many scientific studies, including the one that I've completed, show there's 2 other real strong studies using fMRI showing that the prefrontal cortex goes offline, that it decreases in structure and function. So we need to bring the prefrontal cortex back online for impulse control, judgment, focus, motivation, socialization, memory, all of that. I have them determine and do an executive function project, which uses their mind and body to bring the prefrontal cortex back online. And there's a lot more in there, and I can tell you more about it if you want. But in the hardwire, it's always about figuring out your stress, understanding your stress levels before you're experiencing them, and identifying what you're going to do before you are in the situation that you need it. Kind of like we already talked about. You feel your mother-in-law is coming. You create your plan to get some space. You create your plan to make sure you get healthy food, get enough sleep, do fun things to get real life dopamine.
Dr. Trish,
Yeah.
can you, man, that's all amazing. Thank you so much. Can you explain the actual science of what's happening in the brain through this process of using the machine? Because there's always this voice in my head that's like, no, like if you don't do it the hard way, then you're not going to get the long-term benefits. And that comes from some of my own like you have to work your way to earn
Yes.
love and all of that. But I'm just curious because it's firing off this little belief in my head that's like, no, this can't be true.
Yeah, I'm a skeptic. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well,
But
there you go.
yeah, no. Trust me, I'm literally bred to be a cynic. So the fact that I'm here, like, you know what I mean? I said to my husband, because I know I'm stressed when I start like saying cynical things, because I am just an absolute optimist. And I almost texted my friends 2 cynical things yesterday. I'm like, this girl needs a day off right now because cynicism doesn't serve. Sure, I can absolutely tell you. First, one thing I did want to share is that in my book, the publishing company made me take scientific references out because there was too many. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
So and they're like, you don't have to, cite that. You don't have to cite that. And I'm like, I don't want one person coming back and saying that's my opinion. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so I am the messenger on this. I
Sure.
just want you to know that. And the book is filled with studies. But hopefully I know I've gotten a lot of feedback that it's easy to read and is practical. But, basically what happens is, yeah, I told you how the seeds of addiction are planted when someone's young and they find pornography or sexuality. That changes the way that the brain needs dopamine, and it gets linked to the supernormal stimulus. We'll just say porn just to make it easy. That changes the reward center and the reward pathways. They become overactive. They keep firing, and the more they fire, the more they're desensitizing the dopamine receptors, which become dulled. And then when they become dulled, they need more. That's tolerance building, which leads to escalation, which of course the porn industry is very acutely aware of, and they
Right.
capitalize on to keep people
Absolutely.
hooked.
Yeah.
And so does the algorithm, which is why I'm pivoting into just the algorithm in general. Like, we know even on social media that there's eye tracking. So if you linger on a part of a person's body, you're going to be served a lot more of that. I always joke with men, you know how many scantily clad women are in my Instagram feed? And then I wait as long as, as I can. None. And they don't believe me. I'm like, if I don't look for it, and I said, I search the topic of porn all day, every day, but I'm not looking at the images, so I'm not served them. That's the algorithm. But so if you're doing that, those are, dopamine dependency is the changes in the reward center and the reward pathways. Then there's those reinforcement loops, which keeps firing up that overstimulation, dulling those receptors. At the same time, it decreases the function of the prefrontal cortex, which is like I have a couple analogies that I use. I use the analogy that your frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, is like the captain of the ship. Its job, let me just back up for 1 second. Every area of the brain has been mapped for a very long time. We know what all the areas, their jobs, their skills and abilities that they control are. We know that. That's been scientifically validated for a very long time. Prefrontal cortex, it's like the captain of the ship. Executive function. It's what makes us different than animals, right? All the thinking happens up there, all of it. So, if you are on a ship, the captain has to like figure out where you're going, set sail and set the GPS, and then make sure all the things happen to get you there, right? But in the hull of the ship is a gorilla, and all he wants is bananas. And that's the reward center. It's saying, I want bananas. And it just wants bananas. But and then the captain falls asleep. He's been tranquilized, and the gorilla who wants the bananas just takes over. That's basically what happens. And then, so what I do is quiet that gorilla while waking up the captain. And then ultimately we put that gorilla to sleep because we put him back in his cage where the brain, I call it a pleasure pathway reset. It's a double entendre. I love double entendres. What it means is we are resetting those reward pathways, the pleasure pathways in the brain, but we're also resetting those pathways in a person's life. Because unfortunately, what porn does is it takes a person away from all those pleasurable experiences, like we've already covered a little. And the reason is all the dopamine gets linked to the screen and to porn and to masturbation, and it gets unlinked from work and hobbies and partners and people. There's not enough dopamine there anymore, and it leads to isolation, and that's what leads to addiction, compulsion and addiction.
Right.
So, that's the changes that happen in the brain, but through the beauty and the wonder of neuroplasticity, it's actually quite simple to change those pathways. It's not easy if you're doing it with, I'll give you another analogy. I know I'm probably crushing your souls with analogies, but lately what I've been saying is that if a person does, I have 2 levels of programming. My top tier program that uses all of that technology, it's like getting in a self-driving Tesla in New York and setting a course for California. It's going to take you don't even have to drive. It's going to take you across the country, and you're going to end up in California with very little effort.
Right.
That's my top tier program. I
That's sick.
also offer a digital program. The digital program's like you get in your car and you use your GPS and you still take the super highways. Like, yeah, it's going to take you a little longer and it's going to take you a little more effort, but you still get there. Or you could just go, I feel like going to California, and then try to get there with no help. Like, you'd be lucky if you get to California from New York if you just go, I want to get to California.
Love that. So then when you do the brain scan, so then when they're meeting with you after the fact, you do the first brain scan, and then every time they meet with you, because I'd imagine they're buying the hardware, right?
Mhm.
And then that way you can still continue to do the brain wave like checking throughout the whole process. Is it every session? Is it like
Yeah,
Just-
actually, people in my app, people get charts and graphs every time they do a session. We teach them how to interpret those graphs for themselves. That's the skill building part. You know
Sweet.
how I was
Yeah,
telling
yeah.
you, like, ultimately, and then I have a maintenance program, and then ultimately they can use the hardware with a lower level app for the rest of their lives. And so if you're into it, which most of the people who work with me are, you can check your own brain for the rest of your life, and you can keep a pulse. And I do this obviously. Like, on Friday, it was Thanksgiving weekend, and I'm like, man, I am just beat. I was absolutely beat, and so I'm like, I'm beat. And normally I would like do a bunch of things, and I'm like, I'm just going to chill. And then I went on and I did a session with the maintenance tool, and I could see my brain was much more fatigued than usual. But I don't know if you know this, but I have 5 children.
Oh wow. That's awesome.
So yeah, so my youngest is 15, my oldest is 22. So for Thanksgiving, everybody came back from college a couple days early, a lot of family time, making big Thanksgiving meals. Like, not only do I have like a very busy work life, I love momming, and especially in this new stage of my life, it's more like matriarch stuff, like teaching them how to be adults. So I'm really present in all that, but I was feeling it on Friday. So I took the whole weekend off. Normally I wouldn't. And then Monday I was, all jazzed up again. But being able to see my brain allows me to go, I need a break.
Yeah. Instead of just keep pushing, and then
Yeah.
eventually you break.
Old me would have absolutely done that, just so you know. Old me, I've seen my brain changes, which I've actually never put online, and I'm happy to. I just haven't. Just thinking about, that girl and her brain and how she acted. Like, I talk about jacked up, right? When I was younger, my rate of speech was like triple my rate of speech right now. Some people mock me for talking too slow. I'm like, oh, if you only knew. I had this professor who like mocked me for talking too fast. Talking slower is, again, it's a gift. It's a sign of a more regulated nervous system.
Right.
Dr. Trish, as we're wrapping this up, what are kind of the key takeaways that you want people to know?
I want people to know that if you're not, if you haven't heard any of this brain stuff and you're not including at least the notion of it, I would encourage you to go to my YouTube channel, totally free resource, or get my book, Organized, low cost resource. If you are stuck and you are trying all the things, because I've heard this so many times, I've tried everything. I said, we haven't worked together. You haven't tried everything.
Right.
If you feel like you've tried everything, I totally get that. But there is technology, and thankfully there's people, me and my team, who know how to use it really well to help people much faster. So I want you to know there's pragmatic hope is the way that I talk about it. And there's a section on pragmatic hope and the science behind it in my book too. Like, especially if you're struggling in silence and you haven't told anybody and you don't think there's anything you can do and you've resigned yourself to whatever state you're in right now, it does not have to be that way. I'm
Right.
telling you right now, it does not, definitively. And if you don't believe me, I can show you it in your brain and I can show you the changes over time. So I want people to know, like, this is entirely possible. You just need more help, like you said when we were opening.
Heck yeah. And so how would everybody find you? How are they going to find your YouTube channel? How are they going to find you? How are they going to find your book? What about all that?
Everything's at drtrishleigh.com.
And
There's
that's
a page for the book.
LEIGH.
It is, yeah. So everything's there. There's a tab to click through to the YouTube channel. There's a page that has the book on it. There's lots of information, honestly, probably too much, about how it like, a lot of people will call for information. So it's confusing information too. Like, I've tried to explain it as well as I can to you, and
Right.
you understand like 3% of it right now. It's just the essence of what I do. It is.
It's pretty fascinating.
It's amazing. That's why I'm like, I think I need to go slideshow in the new year for some time at least, so that I can show more graphics and kind of just do my thing like I would if I was teaching a class. So that's why I'm kind of excited about that format. So people want more information. In the new year too, on YouTube, my plan is to talk about explicit matter, but also branch out into 7 other categories of how the algorithm's hijacking your brain. And honestly, they all tie into hypersexuality. But to also kind of extend it out to other ways so people can really fully understand their situation. Because I am aware that people don't get the other nuances of how they're inadvertently reinforcing the need for dopamine.
Right. Love that. Awesome.
Hey, Dr. Trish, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm relatively familiar, with some of your work, but I hadn't quite dug this deep into what you do and how you do it, and I am fascinated. Thank you for making this resource.
Yeah,
available to
thank you.
people.
And you know what? That's bad on me too. I put that in the clarifying video I made about, clarifying why people need more than just a no fap movement, is that somebody was lighting me up for talking about my programs. And I'm like, I said I have 2,000 videos. I never talk about my programs. People don't know I have them. And I firmly believe that's the number one way that a person can overcome their challenges quickly and easily. Of course, it's an investment. That's the world we live in. But the
Right.
return on investment, the value far exceeds the investments. And I wrote that on some comments and I put that in the video. But I want people to know, whether some people light me up or not, I can help. So there's lots more on the underpinnings of my work to come, so that people can understand, because I need people to know they can move forward.
And I know we're wrapping up, but I just had, because I know other people are going to ask this question and they want to know. They start the program with you. How long does it take for them to finally find sobriety, to live a life of recovery?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that
Yep.
stint look like?
I'm always hesitant, because I know people struggle for so long.
Totally.
My program is 6 months long.
Sweet.
And that's a very short amount of time. And I'm not even kidding. Like we measure everything, obviously. I measure it in a lot of different ways, but people get the outcomes. I tell people all the time, there is no other program that's enjoyable. It feels good. You engaging in it, and you get the outcomes that you want. And
Heck yeah.
that's kind of how it rolls. So we usually see significant changes within a month. And then, the skill building part does get a little tricky. Usually it's in months 3, 4, 5. And some clients will say to me, do you think I just need more sessions? You think, we should change my protocol again? And I'm like, no. This is the part where your brain has changed 75%. This is when you take this new brain performance out for a spin.
Right.
So I'm going to encourage you In the program, every person gets, they meet with me, but they also get a monthly coaching call with Zach Carter. He's the lead coach on my team. He's a licensed counselor and he's recovered from his own porn addiction. He's been working with me for almost 4 years. So he's totally trained in everything that I do. And that is on purpose so that we can teach people about their
Right.
brains and how to build the skills. And so I'm like, nope, now it's time you go talk to your wife. I know that's the most terrifying thing you've heard ever. And then, then we'll give a person strategies to pattern interrupt whatever thing is difficult. And, again, like everything that's in the program, I practice on a daily basis and I talk about too online where, communication's a huge part of it. Making sure your life is balanced is a huge part of it. Um, Interpersonal skills is probably the largest thing. People ask me all the time, like, why do I care about porn and why do I care about the algorithm? Like, I don't. I care about people and their relationships. And
Right.
porn and the algorithm are the things that are preventing people for the relationship with themselves, with their partner, with their children, with their community, So, yeah.
Sweet. Love it.
Dr. Trish, thank you so much. Again, if you didn't catch that, you can find her resources on drtrishleigh.com, Leigh, correct?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. You can find us on social media at Unashamed Unafraid. If this was helpful to you and you know someone who would benefit from it, take some time right now and share it with them. This is great information, and we always encourage you to share our podcast and the resources that we have on here.
I already know who I'm sending this to for sure.
Beautiful.
Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you'd like to become part of this movement, you can head over to unashamedunafraid.com/donate and become an outsider, donating just a little bit every month to help us move this forward. And until next time, continue to live unashamed.
Yeah.